Hello and welcome. Today we will talk about French Revolution. Let's start. Enjoy watching. The French Revolution: causes, key events, and impact. Introduction: the seeds of revolution. The French Revolution, one of the most transformative events in world history, began in 1789 and lasted until 1799. It fundamentally changed the political, social, and economic landscape of France and had a profound impact on the rest of Europe and the world. The revolution was driven by a combination of social, economic, and political factors that culminated in the overthrow of the monarchy and the establishment of a republic. To understand the revolution, we must delve into the complexities of the Ancien regime and the myriad of issues that led to the uprising. Economic hardships and inequality. In the years leading up to the revolution, France was plagued by severe economic difficulties. The country had amassed enormous debt due to its involvement in expensive wars, including the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution. The financial burden of these conflicts was immense, and the French government struggled to manage its debt. The cost of maintaining the opulent royal court at Versailles further strained the treasury. These financial pressures led to increased taxation, which disproportionately affected the common people, especially the peasantry. The French society was divided into 3 estates: the clergy, first estate; the nobility, second estate; and the commoners, third estate. The first estate comprised about 1% of the population but owned about 10% of the land. The second estate made up around 2% of the population and controlled about 25 to 30% of the land. Both of these estates enjoyed significant privileges, including exemption from most taxes. The third estate, which made up about 97% of the population, bore the brunt of taxation and had little political power. This stark inequality fueled resentment and demands for change among the common people. The financial crisis was exacerbated by poor harvests in the 1780s, which led to food shortages and rising bread prices. Bread was the staple food for most French people, and its scarcity caused widespread hunger and discontent. The combination of economic hardship and social inequality created a volatile situation as the Third Estate struggled to survive under the burden of taxes and the high cost of living. Intellectual influences and Enlightenment ideas. The Enlightenment, an intellectual movement that emphasized reason, individualism, and skepticism of traditional authority, played a crucial role in shaping revolutionary thought. Philosophers such as Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu criticized the existing social and political order and proposed ideas for reforming society based on principles of equality, liberty, and justice. Voltaire was a fierce critic of the Catholic Church and the absolutist monarchy. He advocated for freedom of speech, religious tolerance, and the separation of church and state. His satirical writings exposed the corruption and hypocrisy of the clergy and the nobility, inspiring many to question the legitimacy of the Ancien regime. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's works, particularly The Social Contract and Emile, had a profound impact on revolutionary ideology. Rousseau argued that sovereignty belonged to the people and that government should be based on the general will. He believed that individuals should be free and equal, and that society should be organized in a way that reflects the collective will of its members. His ideas about direct democracy and the inherent goodness of humanity influenced many revolutionary leaders. Montesquieu, in his work The Spirit of the Laws, advocated for the separation of powers within government. He argued that a balanced system of government with checks and balances was necessary to prevent tyranny. His ideas about constitutional government and the rule of law resonated with those seeking to challenge the absolute power of the monarchy. These Enlightenment ideas spread rapidly through France, thanks in part to the proliferation of books, pamphlets, and newspapers. Salons, coffeehouses, and other venues for public discussion became hotbeds of revolutionary thought, where intellectuals and ordinary citizens alike debated the merits of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Political crisis and the Estates General. The financial crisis forced King Louis XVI to summon the Estates General in 1789, a General Assembly representing the three estates, to address the fiscal problems. The Estates General had not met since 1614, and its convening highlighted the severity of the crisis. The Third Estate, frustrated by their lack of representation and the unwillingness of the other estates to share the financial burden, took a bold step by declaring themselves the National Assembly. The Estates General convened at Versailles in May 1789. The traditional voting system, which gave each estate one vote, effectively ensured that the first and second estates could outvote the third estate. This system was seen as deeply unfair by the third estate, which represented the vast majority of the population. The third estate demanded that voting be conducted by head, allowing for a more equitable representation. When their demands were rejected, the representatives of the Third Estate took a radical step. On June 17, 1789, they declared themselves the National Assembly, asserting that they represented the true will of the French people. This bold move marked the beginning of a new political era. The National Assembly vowed to draft a constitution and sought to establish a more equitable system of governance. This move was seen as a direct challenge to the king's authority and set the stage for the revolutionary events that would follow. In response, King Louis XVI attempted to suppress the National Assembly by closing their meeting hall. Undeterred, the members of the National Assembly moved to a nearby indoor tennis court, where they took the famous tennis court oath on June 20th, 1789. They pledged not to disband until they had drafted a new constitution for France. This act of defiance galvanized the revolutionary movement and inspired widespread support among the common people. Social unrest and the storming of the Bastille. Social unrest was widespread in the lead-up to the revolution. The common people, suffering from food shortages and economic hardship, were increasingly discontented. The tension reached a boiling point on July 14, 1789, when a mob stormed the Bastille, a medieval fortress and prison in Paris that symbolized the tyranny of the monarchy. The storming of the Bastille was a pivotal event in the revolution. The fortress was seen as a symbol of royal oppression, and its fall represented the people's power to challenge the monarchy. The mob, composed of workers, tradesmen, and soldiers, overwhelmed the defenders and captured the fortress. They released the few prisoners held there and seized the weapons and ammunition stored inside. The fall of the Bastille had a profound impact on the course of the revolution. It demonstrated the power of the people's will and marked the beginning of widespread revolutionary action. The storming of the Bastille became a symbol of the fight against oppression and is celebrated today as France's national holiday, Bastille Day. The news of the Bastille's fall spread rapidly throughout France, igniting similar uprisings in other cities and towns. The revolutionary fervor grew, and the National Assembly began to enact significant reforms. The violence and unrest also forced King Louis XVI to recognize the National Assembly and to recall the troops he had stationed around Paris, signaling a temporary retreat by the monarchy. The Great Fear and the abolition of feudalism. The summer of 1789 saw a wave of panic and violence known as the Great Fear. Rumors of aristocratic conspiracies to suppress the revolution led to widespread peasant uprisings across the countryside. In response to this turmoil, the National Assembly took significant steps to address the grievances of the peasants. During the Great Fear, peasants attacked the chateaux of the nobility, destroying feudal records and symbols of aristocratic power. They seized grain and other resources, driven by hunger and desperation. The violence and chaos spread quickly, as fear and suspicion fueled the actions of the peasantry. In response to this unrest, the National Assembly took dramatic action on the night of August 4th, 1789. In a historic session, the Assembly abolished feudal privileges and ended the feudal system, marking a major victory for the peasantry. The nobles and clergy voluntarily gave up their privileges, including exemption from taxes and exclusive hunting rights. This act not only addressed economic and social inequalities, but also helped to unify the revolutionaries around a common cause. The abolition of feudalism was followed by the adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen on August 26, 1789. This seminal document laid out the fundamental principles of the revolution, including liberty, equality, and fraternity. It declared that all men are born free and equal in rights, and it emphasized the sovereignty of the people and the protection of individual freedoms. The Declaration became a cornerstone of revolutionary ideology and inspired similar movements worldwide. The Women's March on Versailles. One of the most dramatic and influential events of the early revolution was the Women's March on Versailles, which took place on October 5th to 6th, 1789. Thousands of women, primarily from Paris, marched to the royal palace at Versailles to demand bread and protest the king's policies. The march was driven by economic hardship and anger over the perceived indifference of the royal family to the suffering of the common people. The women, armed with weapons and determination, forced their way into the palace and confronted King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Their demands for bread and political reform highlighted the desperation and resolve of the revolutionaries. The march ended with the royal family being escorted back to Paris by the women, where they were effectively placed under house arrest in the Tuileries Palace. The Women's March on Versailles was significant for several reasons. It underscored the active participation of women in the revolutionary movement and highlighted the power of popular protest. It also marked the beginning of the end for the monarchy, as the king's authority was increasingly undermined by the revolutionary forces. Key events of the French Revolution: the formation of the National Assembly and the Tennis Court Oath. The financial crisis and social unrest of the late 18th century forced King Louis XVI to summon the Estates General in May 1789. The convening of this assembly, which had not met since 1614, was a pivotal moment that set the stage for revolutionary change. The Third Estate, representing the commoners, quickly took center stage in the proceedings. The Estates General and the National Assembly. When the Estates General convened, it became clear that the traditional voting system, which gave each estate one vote, was deeply unfair to the Third Estate. The clergy and nobility, the First and Second Estates, could outvote the commoners, the Third Estate, despite the latter representing the vast majority of the population. Frustrated by this imbalance, the Third Estate demanded that voting be conducted by head, ensuring fair representation. When their demands were rejected, the representatives of the Third Estate took a radical step. On June 17, 1789, they declared themselves the National Assembly, asserting that they represented the true will of the French people. This bold move marked the beginning of a new political era, as the National Assembly vowed to draft a constitution and sought to establish a more equitable system of governance. The Tennis Court Oath. In response to the formation of the National Assembly, King Louis XVI attempted to suppress it by closing their meeting hall. Undeterred, the members of the National Assembly moved to a nearby indoor tennis court. On June 20th, 1789, they took the famous tennis court oath, pledging not to disband until they had drafted a new constitution for France. This act of defiance galvanized the revolutionary movement and inspired widespread support among the common people. The Tennis Court Oath was a defining moment in the revolution, symbolizing the unity and determination of the revolutionaries to achieve constitutional reform. It also highlighted the growing rift between the monarchy and the people, setting the stage for further confrontations. The storming of the Bastille and the rise of popular revolt. As tensions continued to rise, the storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, became a symbol of the revolutionary spirit and a turning point in the revolution. The Bastille, a medieval fortress and prison in Paris, represented the tyranny of the monarchy and the old regime. The storming of the Bastille. Amidst growing unrest and rumors of an impending crackdown by royal troops, a mob of Parisians gathered outside the Bastille. They demanded the release of political prisoners and the seizure of the weapons and ammunition stored inside. The governor of the Bastille, Bernard-René Delaunay, initially resisted, but the overwhelming force of the crowd ultimately prevailed. The fall of the Bastille had a profound impact on the course of the revolution. It demonstrated the power of the people's will and marked the beginning of widespread revolutionary action. The storming of the Bastille became a symbol of the fight against oppression and is celebrated today as France's national holiday, Bastille Day. The Great Fear and the Abolition of Feudalism. The summer of 1789 saw a wave of panic and violence known as the Great Fear. Rumors of aristocratic conspiracies to suppress the revolution led to widespread peasant uprisings across the countryside. In response to this turmoil, the National Assembly took significant steps to address the grievances of the peasants. During the Great Fear, peasants attacked the chateaus of the nobility, destroying feudal records and symbols of aristocratic power. They seized grain and other resources, driven by hunger and desperation. The violence and chaos spread quickly as fear and suspicion fueled the actions of the peasantry. In response to this unrest, the National Assembly took dramatic action on the night of August 4th, 1789. In a historic session, the Assembly abolished feudal privileges and ended the feudal system, marking a major victory for the peasantry. The nobles and clergy voluntarily gave up their privileges, including exemption from taxes and exclusive hunting rights. This act not only addressed economic and social inequalities, but also helped to unify the revolutionaries around a common cause. The abolition of feudalism was followed by the adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen on August 26, 1789. This seminal document laid out the fundamental principles of the revolution, including liberty, equality, and fraternity. It declared that all men are born free and equal in rights, and it emphasized the sovereignty of the people and the protection of individual freedoms. The Declaration became a cornerstone of revolutionary ideology and inspired similar movements worldwide. The March on Versailles and the move to Paris. One of the most dramatic and influential events of the early revolution was the Women's March on Versailles, which took place on October 5th to 6th, 1789. Thousands of women, primarily from Paris, marched to the royal palace at Versailles to demand bread and protest the king's policies. The march was driven by economic hardship and anger over the perceived indifference of the royal family to the suffering of the common people. The Women's March on Versailles. The women, armed with weapons and determination, forced their way into the palace and confronted King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Their demands for bread and political reform highlighted the desperation and resolve of the revolutionaries. The march ended with the royal family being escorted back to Paris by the women, where they were effectively placed under house arrest in the Tuileries Palace. The Women's March on Versailles was significant for several reasons. It underscored the active participation of women in the revolutionary movement and highlighted the power of popular protest. It also marked the beginning of the end for the monarchy, as the king's authority was increasingly undermined by the revolutionary forces. The civil constitution of the clergy. In 1790, the National Assembly enacted the civil constitution of the clergy, which aimed to bring the Catholic Church under state control. This legislation required clergy to swear an oath of loyalty to the state and reduced the influence of the Church in French society. The measure was deeply controversial and led to a schism within the Church, as many clergy refused to take the oath. The civil constitution of the clergy alienated a significant portion of the population, particularly devout Catholics, and fueled counter-revolutionary sentiment. It highlighted the tensions between revolutionary ideals and traditional institutions, further complicating the political landscape. The flight to Varennes. In June 1791, King Louis XVI and his family attempted to flee France in a bid to join counter-revolutionary forces and regain control. Disguised and traveling under false identities, they made their way towards the Austrian border. However, they were recognized and arrested in the town of Varennes just before reaching safety. The flight to Varennes was a critical turning point in the revolution. It shattered any remaining trust between the king and the revolutionaries. The attempted escape was seen as a betrayal, confirming suspicions that the king was conspiring against the revolution. Louis XVI and his family were brought back to Paris under guard, and the event further radicalized the revolutionary movement. The radical phase and the Reign of Terror. As the revolution progressed, it became increasingly radical and violent. The period known as the Reign of Terror, from 1793 to 1794, was marked by mass executions and political purges as revolutionary leaders sought to eliminate perceived enemies of the state. The rise of the Jacobins. The Jacobins, a radical political club led by figures such as Maximilien Robespierre, became the dominant force in the revolutionary government. They advocated for the establishment of a republic and the execution of the king. The Jacobins were opposed by more moderate revolutionaries, known as the Girondins, who favored a constitutional monarchy. The execution of King Louis XVI. On January 21, 1793, King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine following a trial in which he was found guilty of treason. His execution marked the end of the monarchy and the establishment of the First French Republic. The event sent shockwaves throughout Europe and intensified the conflict between revolutionary France and its neighboring monarchies. The Reign of Terror. Under the leadership of Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, the Reign of Terror aimed to consolidate revolutionary power and suppress counter-revolutionary activity. Thousands of people were executed by guillotine, including prominent revolutionaries, nobles, and ordinary citizens accused of disloyalty. The Revolutionary Tribunal was established to try suspected enemies of the revolution, and the law of suspects broadened the criteria for arrest and execution. The Reign of Terror created an atmosphere of fear and paranoia, as accusations of treason and counter-revolutionary activity led to swift and often arbitrary punishment. Economic and social reforms. Despite the violence, the radical phase of the revolution also saw significant economic and social reforms. The revolutionary government implemented measures to stabilize the economy, including price controls on essential goods and the redistribution of land. The abolition of slavery in French colonies was another notable achievement, reflecting the revolution's commitment to liberty and equality. The fall of Robespierre. The Reign of Terror eventually led to its own downfall. As the purges continued, Robespierre's dictatorial methods and increasing paranoia alienated many of his former allies. years. In July 1794, he was arrested and executed, marking the end of the Reign of Terror. The fall of Robespierre brought an end to the radical phase of the revolution and ushered in a period of relative stability known as the Thermidorian reaction. The new government, the Directory, sought to restore order and moderate the excesses of the revolution, but it faced ongoing challenges and unrest. Challenges and decline of the French Revolution, the Directory, and continued unrest. Following the fall of Robespierre and the end of the Reign of Terror, the revolution entered a new phase characterized by attempts to stabilize the government and address ongoing social and economic issues. The Directory, established in 1795, was the executive body that governed France during this period. However, it faced significant challenges and ultimately failed to provide lasting stability. The establishment of the Directory. The Thermidorian reaction, which followed the fall of Robespierre, led to the creation of the Directory, a 5-member executive body intended to prevent the concentration of power in the hands of a single individual. The Directory was supported by a bicameral legislature consisting of the Council of 500 and the Council of Ancients. This new government structure aimed to balance power and prevent the return of both royalist and radical Jacobin influences. Economic difficulties. The Directory inherited a country in economic turmoil. The Revolutionary Wars had drained the treasury, and inflation was rampant due to the excessive printing of assignats, paper money. The government struggled to address these financial issues, leading to widespread poverty and discontent among the populace. In an effort to stabilize the economy, the Directory implemented several measures, including the revaluation of the assignat and attempts to reform the tax system. However, these efforts were largely unsuccessful, and economic hardship continued to plague France. Food shortages and high prices led to frequent riots and unrest in both urban and rural areas. Political instability. The Directory faced significant political challenges from both the left and the right. Royalists sought to restore the monarchy, while Jacobins and other radical groups aimed to revive the revolutionary fervor of the past. This political polarization made it difficult for the Directory to govern effectively and maintain order. The government relied heavily on the military to suppress uprisings and maintain control. General Napoleon Bonaparte, who had risen to prominence during the Revolutionary Wars, played a crucial role in defending the Directory against internal and external threats. His military successes, particularly in Italy, bolstered the Directory's position but also increased his personal power and influence. The coup of 18 Brumaire. The Directory's inability to provide stable governance and address the pressing issues facing France ultimately led to its downfall. On November 9, 1799, 18 Brumaire, year 8 in the revolutionary calendar, Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup d'etat, overthrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate. This marked the end of the revolutionary government and the beginning of Napoleon's rise to power. Napoleon's coup was initially presented as a means to save the revolution and restore order. He established a new government with himself as first consul, effectively concentrating power in his hands. The coup of 18 Brumaire is often seen as the end of the French Revolution and the beginning of the Napoleonic era. The Napoleonic era and the legacy of the Revolution. Napoleon Bonaparte's rise to power marked a new chapter in French history. While his rule brought significant changes and continued some revolutionary principles, it also represented a departure from the democratic ideals that had initially inspired the revolution. Napoleon's reforms. As first consul, and later as emperor, Napoleon implemented a series of reforms that had a lasting impact on France and Europe. These reforms included the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal system that codified many of the revolutionary principles of equality and individual rights. The Napoleonic Code served as a model for legal systems in many other countries and remains one of Napoleon's most enduring legacies. Napoleon also reformed the administrative and educational systems, centralizing authority and creating a merit-based bureaucracy. His reforms aimed to create a more efficient and effective government capable of managing the needs of a modern state. He established the Bank of France to stabilize the economy and introduced measures to improve infrastructure and promote industrialization. Military expansion and European dominance. Napoleon's military campaigns reshaped the map of Europe. His conquests spread revolutionary ideas and brought significant territorial changes. The establishment of satellite states and the imposition of Napoleonic rule across much of Europe extended the influence of the French Revolution. However, these conquests also led to widespread conflict and resistance as other European powers sought to curb French dominance. The Napoleonic Wars, which lasted from 1803 to 1815, saw a series of alliances and coalitions formed against France. Despite numerous victories, Napoleon's ambitions ultimately led to his downfall. The disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 and the subsequent defeats by the Sixth Coalition culminated in his abdication in 1814. The Congress of Vienna and the restoration of the monarchy. Following Napoleon's defeat, the Congress of Vienna, 1814 to 1815, sought to restore stability and order to Europe. The Congress aimed to reverse the territorial changes brought about by the Napoleonic Wars and restore the pre-revolutionary monarchies. The Bourbon monarchy was restored in France with Louis XVIII as king, marking the end of the revolutionary period. The Congress of Vienna established a new balance of power in Europe aimed at preventing future conflicts and maintaining peace. While it succeeded in restoring monarchies and creating a framework for international diplomacy, the ideas and principles of the French Revolution continued to influence political movements and uprisings throughout the 19th century. The legacy of the French Revolution. The French Revolution left an indelible mark on French society and the world. Its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity inspired future generations and movements for democratic and social change. The revolution challenged the established order and demonstrated the power of the people to overthrow oppressive regimes. The Napoleonic Code and other reforms introduced during the Revolution and Napoleonic era had a lasting impact on legal and administrative systems worldwide. The Revolution also led to significant cultural and intellectual developments as revolutionary ideas spread through literature, art, and philosophy. Despite its achievements, the revolution was also marked by violence, terror, and political instability. The reign of terror and the internal conflicts of the revolutionary period highlighted the challenges of achieving radical change and the dangers of extremism. The French Revolution's legacy is complex and multifaceted. It set the stage for the modern era, influencing political thought, social movements, and the development of nation-states. Its impact can be seen in the democratic principles and institutions that emerged in the aftermath and continue to shape the world today. The impact and legacy of the French Revolution. Global influence and the spread of revolutionary ideas. The French Revolution had a profound and far-reaching impact that extended well beyond the borders of France. The ideas and principles that emerged during the revolution inspired a wave of revolutionary movements and political changes across Europe and the world. The spread of revolutionary ideals. The French Revolution's core principles, liberty, equality, and fraternity, resonated with people across the globe who were seeking to challenge oppressive regimes and demand greater political and social rights. The revolution demonstrated that it was possible to overthrow a long-standing monarchy and establish a republic based on democratic ideals. Revolutions and uprisings in Europe. The revolutionary fervor that swept through France spread to other parts of Europe, leading to a series of uprisings and revolutions in the early 19th century. Countries such as Spain, Italy, and Germany saw movements that sought to emulate the French Revolution's call for liberty and equality. These revolutions often faced fierce resistance from conservative and monarchical forces, but they planted the seeds for future democratic developments. The Haitian Revolution. One of the most significant and direct impacts of the French Revolution was the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804. Inspired by the ideals of the French Revolution and driven by the desire for freedom, enslaved people in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, now Haiti, rose up against their oppressors. Under the leadership of figures such as Toussaint Louverture, the Haitian Revolution successfully overthrew the colonial regime and abolished slavery, leading to the establishment of the first independent Black Republic. The Haitian Revolution had a profound impact on the Atlantic world, challenging the institution of slavery and inspiring other enslaved people to seek their freedom. It also served as a powerful example of the global reach of revolutionary ideals. The influence on Latin American independence movements. The ideas of the French Revolution also influenced independence movements in Latin America. Leaders such as Simon Bolivar and José de San Martín were inspired by the principles of liberty and equality as they fought to liberate their countries from Spanish colonial rule. The success of these movements led to the creation of independent republics throughout Latin America in the early 19th century. The impact on political thought. The French Revolution had a lasting impact on political thought and philosophy. The works of Enlightenment thinkers, combined with the revolutionary experience, influenced the development of modern political ideologies, including liberalism, socialism, and nationalism. The concepts of popular sovereignty, the rule of law, and the protection of individual rights became central tenets of democratic theory. Constitutionalism and legal reforms. The Revolution's emphasis on written constitutions and legal reforms influenced the development of constitutional governments worldwide. The Napoleonic Code, introduced by Napoleon Bonaparte, served as a model for legal systems in many countries, promoting the principles of equality before the law and the protection of property rights. The Revolution also led to significant changes in the structure of government, including the establishment of representative institutions and the separation of powers. These changes provided a blueprint for future democratic reforms and the creation of modern nation-states. The cultural and social impact. The French Revolution brought about profound cultural and social changes. The revolutionaries sought to create a new society based on the principles of reason, secularism, and citizenship. This led to the secularization of many aspects of French society, including education, marriage, and governance. Changes in social hierarchies. The abolition of feudal privileges and the establishment of equal citizenship challenged traditional social hierarchies and promoted greater social mobility. The revolution also opened up opportunities for individuals from diverse backgrounds to participate in government and public life, breaking down the rigid class structures of the ancien regime. Advancements in education and science. The revolutionaries placed a strong emphasis on education and the promotion of scientific knowledge. The establishment of institutions such as the École Polytechnique and the expansion of public education reflected the revolution's commitment to Enlightenment ideals. These advancements contributed to the development of a more educated and informed citizenry. The arts and literature. The French Revolution also had a significant impact on the arts and literature. Revolutionary themes and ideas were reflected in the works of artists, writers, and musicians. The period saw the rise of Romanticism, a movement that emphasized emotion, individualism, and the sublime, often in reaction to the rationalism of the Enlightenment. The challenges and contradictions of the Revolution. Despite its profound impact and achievements, the French Revolution was marked by significant challenges and contradictions. The Reign of Terror, with its mass executions and political purges, highlighted the dangers of revolutionary extremism and the potential for violence in the pursuit of ideological purity. The limits of equality and liberty. While the revolution promoted the ideals of equality and liberty, it often fell short of fully realizing these principles. Women, in particular, continued to face significant limitations on their political and social rights. Figures like Olympe de Gouges, who advocated for women's rights, were often marginalized or persecuted. The revolution also struggled to reconcile its commitment to universal rights with the realities of colonialism and slavery. The balance of power and stability. The revolution's aftermath revealed the difficulties of balancing revolutionary ideals with the need for stability and order. The rise of Napoleon Bonaparte and the subsequent Napoleonic Wars demonstrated the challenges of maintaining a republican government in the face of internal and external threats. The eventual restoration of the monarchy in 1815 highlighted the complexities of sustaining revolutionary change over the long term. The long-term legacy. The French Revolution's legacy continues to be felt in contemporary political and social movements. Its emphasis on human rights, democratic governance, and social justice has inspired generations of activists and reformers. The revolution's ideals have been invoked in struggles for independence, civil rights, and social equality around the world. The modern French Republic. The principles of the French Revolution are enshrined in the modern French Republic. The values of liberty, equality, and fraternity remain central to French national identity and are reflected in the country's legal and political institutions. The revolution's impact on French society, culture, and governance continues to shape the nation's development and its role in the world. Conclusion. The French Revolution was a transformative event that reshaped France and had a lasting impact on the world. Its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity challenged the established order and inspired movements for democratic change across the globe. While the revolution was marked by significant challenges and contradictions, its legacy endures in the principles of human rights, democratic governance, and social justice that continue to guide modern societies. The revolution's impact on political thought, legal systems, and cultural developments highlights its importance as a foundational event in modern history. The French Revolution remains a powerful symbol of the potential for ordinary people to bring about profound social and political change, and its lessons continue to resonate in contemporary struggles for freedom and equality. Key figures of the French Revolution. King Louis XVI, 1754 to 1793. Role: King of France. Contribution. Louis XVI was the last king of France before the fall of the monarchy during the French Revolution. His financial mismanagement and indecisiveness contributed to the economic crisis that precipitated the revolution. He was eventually arrested, tried for treason, and executed by guillotine in January 1793. Marie Antoinette, 1755 to 1793. Role: Queen of France. Contribution. Marie Antoinette, the wife of Louis XVI, was a symbol of the extravagance and excesses of the French monarchy. Her perceived indifference to the suffering of the French people and her association with foreign interests made her a target of revolutionary anger. She was executed by guillotine in October 1793. Maximilien Robespierre, 1758 to 1794. Role: Revolutionary leader, member of the Committee of Public Safety. Contribution. Robespierre was a leading figure in the radical phase of the French Revolution, particularly during the Reign of Terror. He was a member of the Jacobin Club and the Committee of Public Safety, where he advocated for the execution of enemies of the revolution. His fall from power and execution in July 1794 marked the end of the Reign of Terror. Georges Danton, 1759 to 1794. Role: Revolutionary leader, first president of the Committee of Public Safety. Contribution. Danton was a prominent early leader of the French Revolution and a key figure in the establishment of the First French Republic. He played a crucial role in rallying the French people to defend the revolution during times of crisis. Danton was executed by guillotine in April 1794, accused of counter-revolutionary activities by Robespierre and his allies. Jean-Paul Marat, 1743 to 1793. Role: revolutionary journalist and politician. Contribution: Marat was a radical journalist whose writings in L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people, incited revolutionary fervor and violence. He was a vocal advocate for the rights of the poor and a fierce critic of the monarchy and moderate revolutionaries. Marat was assassinated in his bathtub by Charlotte Corday in July 1793. Charlotte Corday, 1768 to 1793. Role: political assassin. Contribution: Corday, a Girondin sympathizer, assassinated Jean-Paul Marat in an attempt to halt the radical violence of the revolution. She believed that by killing Marat, she could restore peace and prevent further bloodshed. Corday was executed by guillotine shortly after the assassination. Camille Desmoulins, 1760 to 1794. Role: revolutionary journalist and politician. Contribution: Desmoulins was a prominent revolutionary journalist and a close ally of Danton. He was one of the primary voices calling for the abolition of the monarchy and the establishment of a republic. Desmoulins was executed by guillotine in April 1794 alongside Danton during the Reign of Terror. Olympe de Gouges, 1748 to 1793. Role: playwright and political activist. Contribution: de Gouges was a pioneering feminist and the author of the Declaration of the Rights of Woman and of the Female Citizen, 1791. She advocated for gender equality and the rights of women, challenging the male-dominated revolutionary leadership. De Gouges was executed by guillotine in November 1793 for her political writings and activism. Jacques-Pierre Brisset, 1754 to 1793. Role: leader of the Girondins. Contribution: Brisset was a leading figure of the Girondin faction, which favored a more moderate approach to the revolution. He advocated for the expansion of the revolution beyond France's borders and supported the war against Austria. Brisset was executed by guillotine in October 1793 during the conflict between the Girondins and the Jacobins.